Welcome to this tutorial on importing data into EDC. This is the first in a series of tutorials and will cover general concepts. The second tutorial discusses obtaining and processing source data, while the third walks through an example of importing data both using the wizard and then repeating the same import using the description file. Finally, additional tutorials will cover more advanced and specialized topics. Now let's take a look at some general concepts that will help give you a solid foundation for understanding the import. First, we will take a high-level look at data in EDC in order to understand why an import process is necessary. We will consider the different types of data in EDC, and then we will look at which tables can be imported to. Finally, we will take a high-level look at the import process.
Everything that a record center does, from high-level records management services that you sell your customers, to operational details of efficiently getting the correct physical box and file to the customer at the correct time, as well as the business of getting paid for those services, relies on keeping complete and accurate information. EDCRC therefore does much more than a basic spreadsheet. It keeps and organizes good quality data, ensuring that it is complete each time a record is created. Given the many varied needs of your business, EDC has over 180 tables, all working together. This is why, when you bring in large amounts of data, EDC requires an import process that screens each line of data, ensuring that it will work properly with the system. For the purpose of this discussion, we will consider 4 types of fields. The first type of field is descriptive. It is very useful for your customers in identifying their boxes, but it is not required for EDC to function. Examples include box description, owner, ranges, and similar information. The second type of field is used to uniquely identify a record. For a given customer, the RC number of each box and each file is unique. The customer box number is also unique. Next, we have fields that are required for creating new records. For example, if a box is in, it must have a location in order to be picked. It must have a volume for billing purposes. It must have departments, both for billing and in order to determine access. And it must also have a type in order to help determine the retention of the box. Finally, we have fields that are system generated, such as history. We don't generally tend to think about these fields very much, but in order for EDC to function properly, they are created. It is possible to import data into a variety of different tables. The most commonly imported tables are the file and box tables, and an import wizard exists for each of these. Images can also be imported, and there's a special process for this. The import of images will be covered separately. Box, file, and image imports account for the vast majority of imports performed by record centers. However, there are instances where other imports can be useful. Now let's consider what has to happen during an import process. First, we start with the data file. Then we have to tell EDC how to read it and what information to put where. We have to let EDC know which validation and processing options to apply. And then EDC actually has to perform the validation and create records, logging any history information, and then putting information about this import into the import log. The means by which we tell EDC what to do is called an import description file. The import description file is a set of instructions that maps from a spreadsheet and its various fields into the correct fields in EDC, specifying default values, processing options, validation options. It's fairly complex, but it can be created easily for boxes and files using an import wizard. Your role in the process is to provide the data, to provide the description file, for example using the wizard, to tell EDC which description file to use, and then after the import has been performed, to review the import log just to make sure everything has gone okay, and then to spot check the results, potentially with the customer, to ensure that you're satisfied with the way the data has come in. Do be careful when performing imports, as these can affect a lot of records and cannot be undone. If it is not a routine import, you might want to back up the data by copying the database and locking out all users until the import is done and verified. We recommend testing the import with one rich line of data, meaning a line in which most of the fields have been filled out, and then reviewing the results to ensure that you and the customer are satisfied. Be systematic when performing imports, and if you have any doubts after viewing the remainder of these tutorials, please contact support@docudatasoft.com and we'll be happy to help you.